Imagine the perfect picture: a morning, a young woman, a bicycle. Everything seems normal, routine. But now add one detail: an old pickup truck trailing behind her, never too far away. That one image changes everything, doesn't it? Now, picture the evidence: a cassette, a shattered Walkman. Was it a sign left by the victim? A desperate attempt to point the way? But what if those clues led nowhere at all? And here lies the most haunting piece of the puzzle: a photograph found in Florida. A girl who looks exactly like Tara. Her mother cries out, "That's her." But experts say, not confirmed. Do you see the picture forming? A chain of evidence that crumbles in your hands. The question is, can you solve a puzzle when every single piece might be a lie? The morning of September 20th, 1988, in Belen, New Mexico, began warm and bright. The desert air still carried a hint of the cool night, slowly rising under the autumn sun. Inside the family's home on Rio Communities Boulevard, 19-year-old college student Tara Calico prepared for her daily bike ride along her usual route, Highway 47. Tara was the embodiment of youthful energy and discipline. A sophomore at the University of New Mexico, she managed to balance her studies, a part-time job at the First National Bank of Belen, and an active social life. Friends and family described her as punctual, determined, and joyful. Someone who always kept her word, who always followed through with her plans. She had grown up in a close-knit middle-class family. Her mother, Patty Dole, worked as a school secretary. Her stepfather, John Dole, was a manager at a local furniture company. That morning, Tara set out to ride 36 miles. Her familiar route took her south on Highway 47 toward Los Lunas, then back again. It was a road she knew well, a trip she usually finished in about an hour and a half. The landscape around her was pure New Mexico, wide stretches of desert dotted with cacti and shrubs, distant mountains standing against the horizon. Traffic was light in the early hours, making the ride quiet and seemingly safe. Tara wore white shorts with thin green stripes, her favorite biking outfit, a loose white t-shirt with the First National Bank logo, and a pair of white Nike tennis shoes. She carried a small waist pack with house keys, some cash, and her driver's license, just the basics for a short ride. Her constant companion was a neon pink Huffy mountain bike, a gift from her parents on her 18th birthday. Everyone in town recognized it. The bright color stood out vividly against the muted desert tones, and Tara herself had become a familiar sight to drivers and locals along the roadside. She also brought along her yellow Sony Walkman. That morning, it played a cassette by the rock band Boston, music she loved, especially their album from 1976, which she practically knew by heart. The plan was simple: finish her ride, go home, shower, have a quick snack, then meet her boyfriend at 12:30 for a game of tennis. Like everything in Tara's life, her day was mapped out with precision, but this predictability, the very routine that made her seem so responsible, may have been what made her most vulnerable. Just before she left the house that morning, Patty shared one quick exchange with her daughter. Like any worried mother, she voiced her concern. She didn't like Tara biking that lonely stretch of highway alone. The area was considered relatively safe, but the isolation of certain parts of the highway always worried her mother. Once again, Patty urged Tara to carry a can of mace for protection, a small precaution, something that could help if trouble ever found her. As always, Tara brushed it off. She felt completely secure on that road, a stretch she knew as well as the lines on her own hand. For years, she had biked the same route without a single problem. Local drivers recognized her. Some even waved as they passed by. That bright pink bicycle had become her signature on the road, and Tara considered it a kind of safety in itself. As she left the house, Tara tossed a playful remark over her shoulder, a line meant as a joke, but one that would later sound chilling, almost prophetic. "Mom, if I'm not back by noon, you can come looking for me." It was typical of Tara, a hint of irony to calm her mother's fears. She used lines like that often, a light-hearted way of showing just how unfounded her mother's worries were. At 9:30 that morning, Tara climbed onto her pink Huffy mountain bike. She slipped on her sunglasses, started her Walkman, and pedaled south down Highway 47 toward the rising sun and toward her fate. From the kitchen window, Patty watched her daughter disappear around the bend. It was the last time she ever saw Tara alive. For a moment, the only thing that lingered was the faint sound of music fading on the wind and the steady hum of bicycle tires against asphalt. Quiet echoes of a girl who, within hours, would become the center of one of America's most perplexing disappearance cases. Highway 47 in those years was just another small-town road of the American Southwest, a two-lane asphalt strip cutting through sparse desert towns with farms and roadside diners scattered miles apart. Traffic at that time of morning was minimal, local commuters heading for work, an occasional trucker passing through. So what could have pulled such a responsible young woman off course? Was it chance? Or was someone waiting for her along that familiar stretch of roadway? By noon on September 20th, 1988, life in the small community of Belen ticked on at its ordinary pace. But inside her home, Patty's worry sharpened into dread. Tara had never been late, not even by 5 minutes. And yet by 12:30, the time she was supposed to meet her boyfriend for a tennis match, she was nowhere to be found. Patty knew her daughter's route better than anyone, 36 miles down Highway 47 to Los Lunas and back again. She had biked it hundreds of times over the years. Even with breaks, the ride should not have lasted more than 2 hours. If she left at 9:30, she should have been home by noon at the latest. Now, unease turned to full panic. Patty got into the family's sky blue Chevrolet Citation. She drove slowly down Highway 47, eyes straining, searching every ditch and roadside. Maybe Tara had blown a tire. Maybe she had fallen, or maybe she had just taken a longer stop somewhere along the way. But mile after mile, the road was empty. No sign of a bicycle, no sign of Tara. Patty drove all the way to Los Lunas, the very turn her daughter always made, then circled back slowly, scanning the other lane. Still, nothing. It was as if the desert road itself had swallowed her whole. Returning home in the early afternoon, Patty wasted no time. She picked up the phone and called the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher sent her through to Sergeant James Daly. At first, he treated the call as routine. Another worried mother. Another report of someone running late. He had no idea this case would haunt Valencia County for decades to come. At first, investigators considered the possibility that Tara had simply changed her plans. A 19-year-old student might have met friends. She might have decided to spend her day differently than scheduled. But when Patty described her daughter's strict character, her punctuality, her sense of responsibility, her commitment to routine, the officers began to understand. Tara's disappearance was not a casual detour. Something was wrong. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the first patrol car arrived at the Doel residence on Communities Boulevard. Officers Robert Gonzalez and Michael Vargas officially recorded the missing person report and took charge of the preliminary investigation. They canvassed the neighborhood, checked the local hospitals. They contacted Tara's boyfriend, who confirmed what her mother already feared. Tara never showed up for their tennis match, and she had not called him all day. By nightfall, the search widened. Volunteers poured in, neighbors from Belen, local cyclists, even students from her university. Teams of 5 to 7 people scoured the area along Highway 47, examining every ditch, every clump of brush, every stretch of roadside where a girl or a bicycle might be hidden. The first real lead surfaced the next day. Jerry Brown, a farmer living 3 miles off Highway 47, reported seeing a bright pink bicycle ride past his fields at around 10 o'clock that morning. The time aligned with Tara's estimated route. He also recalled an old pickup truck, light gray in color, passing the same stretch of road not long after. It looked familiar, but he could not see the driver. Then came another statement. Margaret Garcia, an elderly woman living 15 miles from Belen, said that at around 10:30 she saw a young woman on a pink bicycle stop by the roadside to drink from a plastic bottle. The description matched Tara perfectly. But what disturbed investigators was the extra detail. Garcia saw a light-colored pickup stop nearby. A man stepped out and began talking to the cyclist. By the end of the week, 3 more witnesses stepped forward. Each one described the same truck, an older model from the 1950s, light gray or white, with chrome details and a low stance. Again and again, it appeared near Tara's pink bicycle. The most detailed account came from Maria Sanchez, an attendant at a roadside gas station 12 miles from Belen. She recalled how the pickup followed Tara closely, nearly bumping her at times before falling back. To her, the behavior looked aggressive, even threatening. She thought about stepping in, but before she could react, both the truck and the bicycle disappeared from view. Then came the first physical evidence. 4 days after Tara's disappearance, on September 24th, searchers found a cassette in a roadside ditch, just 4 miles from the Calico home. It was Boston. The same album Tara had been playing that morning. The tape was intact. No damage. As if it had been gently placed on the ground, not hurled from a moving vehicle. 2 days later, another discovery. Nearly 19 miles farther, the shattered remains of her yellow Sony Walkman were found. It was badly broken. The plastic shell cracked, the cassette mechanism crushed. Unlike the tape, the Walkman looked violently destroyed, perhaps thrown with force, or smashed deliberately. To Patty, there was no doubt. Her daughter had left these items as a trail, a message, a desperate attempt to show the direction in which her captors were taking her. But the trail ended there. No bicycle, no clothing, no other belongings, and most devastating of all, no Tara. In the following months, alleged sightings poured in. Reports placed her in Albuquerque, in Texas, Colorado, even California. Each one was investigated. Each proved false. Mistaken identities, dead ends, intentional hoaxes. The case ground to a halt. There was no body, no crime scene, no suspects. The only fact that could be stated with certainty was this. On the morning of September 20th, 1988, Tara Calico left on her bicycle, and no one ever saw her again. The suspicious pickup truck, the cassette, the shattered Walkman. Were these the vital keys to the truth, or meaningless fragments scattered across the desert by coincidence? Was it an accident, unseen, unreported? Was she struck down by a hit-and-run driver who panicked and hid the evidence? Or was it a calculated abduction carried out by someone who knew her routine, who stalked her familiar road that day? The desert highways of New Mexico hold their secrets tightly, and by the end of that long autumn, even with countless hours of searching, there was still no solid trace of what happened to Tara Calico that morning. The search that followed would become one of the largest missing person operations in the history of New Mexico. In the first days after Tara vanished, the search exploded. Hundreds of volunteers stepped forward, local residents, university students, church groups, and riders from the cycling club. The county divided the map into sectors, each one combed methodically by teams of 7 to 10 people. Under Sheriff Rene Rivera, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office mobilized everything it could. Search and rescue helicopters took to the air. K-9 handlers brought in trained dogs. Specialists scoured the rough terrain where roads gave way to desert. Crews worked in shifts, day and night, using powerful lights to sweep the emptiest stretches of scrubland. By the end of the first week, tips began to pour in. Locals, after seeing the news, a girl on a bright pink bike, started to recall what they had witnessed the morning of September 20th. Many of those memories focused on one thing: a strange truck, seen more than once near State Road 47. The first detailed statement came from David Morales, who owned a roadside cafe 8 miles from Belen. Around 11 that morning, he saw a young woman on a bright pink bicycle pause to drink from a plastic bottle, blonde hair in a ponytail, white shorts, a sporty t-shirt. Then a second image burned into his memory, an older, light gray pickup rolling by, moving slow, almost watching. It was not just any truck. Witnesses kept describing an older model from the 1950s. Chrome accents, a distinctive front grille, a low stance, rare even then, on New Mexico roads. The driver, a dark-haired man of middle age, crept well below the speed limit and looked repeatedly toward the cyclist. When she continued south, the pickup eased along behind her. Then came a married couple, Robert and Gloria Sanchez, on their way home after a night shift. Around 10 o'clock, they saw the girl on the pink bike heading south along Highway 47. A light-colored pickup followed at a short distance, drawing near, falling back, then closing in again. To them, it looked wrong, threatening. Gloria urged her husband to stop, to offer help. But the road curved ahead, and in a moment, both the bicycle and the truck slipped out of sight. Robert later gave one of the day's strongest vehicle descriptions. An older Chevrolet or Ford pickup, late 1940s to early 1950s, light gray or cream, in unusually good condition, restored or very well kept. A sticker on the rear glass, but too far away to read. He described the driver as a man in his late 30s to early 40s, medium build, dark hair. Another person sat in the cab, but details were unclear. What stuck with him was how intently both men seemed to be watching the cyclist. A highway worker, Carlos Hernandez, added to the pattern. Around 10:30, 12 miles from Belen, he saw the pink bicycle pass his work site. Minutes later, an old pickup with two men inside followed the same direction, moving unusually slow for that stretch, braking several times without obvious cause, as if scanning the road ahead. The most unsettling account came from Maria Vasquez, who owned a small roadside store 15 miles from the Calico home. Near noon, a light-colored older pickup pulled in, two men inside. They bought cold drinks and asked for directions to the nearest gas station, even though it sat just 2 miles farther on the same road. They looked nervous, in a hurry, exchanging glances. The younger one, mid-20s to about 30, light hair, kept checking the road like he feared someone might appear at any second. The older, dark-haired man stayed calmer, but there was tension in both. After paying, they left fast, turning not onto the highway, but onto a dirt road leading toward the hills. Vasquez tried to memorize the plate. She believed the New Mexico letters began with an M and the digits started with either 4 or 6. Investigators broadcast a regional alert for a light gray 1950s pickup with two men inside tied to sightings along Highway 47. Officers cross-checked every registered vehicle that fit. Owners were interviewed. Alibis verified for September 20th. 7 pickups matched the description, but each lead collapsed. Men at work, men in the hospital, a trip out of state, an elderly farmer physically incapable of an abduction. Still, one detail remained constant across witnesses: a light-colored 1950s Ford-style pickup with New Mexico plates stalking a girl on a bright pink bicycle along State Road 47 that morning. A truck investigators would never manage to find. For months, the investigation stalled. Despite multiple reports about a suspicious pickup, police could not identify the vehicle or the men inside it. Doubts crept in about the reliability of the witnesses. Maybe people had seen different trucks at different times and stitched those memories onto Tara's case simply because the entire town was on edge. Everything changed 10 months later when a photograph surfaced in Florida. It reignited the case and raised more questions than answers. June 10, 1989, in the coastal town of Port St. Joe, Florida, a woman named Erlinda Valencia finished her shopping at an Eckerd store. Crossing the sunlit parking lot, she noticed a small color Polaroid lying face down on the asphalt. She picked it up, ready to drop it in the trash, and froze. 2 young people stared back from the image, a girl and a boy, lying in the back of a white van. Their wrists were bound, their mouths sealed with black tape. The girl looked 18 to 20, shoulder-length blonde hair. The boy seemed younger, perhaps 10 to 12, with dark hair. Both gazed into the camera with eyes full of fear. Valencia drove straight to the local police. Officers alerted federal authorities. The image clearly suggested a serious crime, possibly a kidnapping. Within days, the photograph circulated through missing person databases nationwide. In Valencia County, New Mexico, Detective Rick Dyer saw the image. The girl looked hauntingly like Tara Calico. He sent a copy to Tara's family for identification. Patty Doel's reaction was immediate and absolute. That was her daughter. She pointed to specific details: the shape of the face, the nose, the hair color, and, most of all, a small, distinctive scar on the right leg, the result of a childhood car accident. To Patty, the mark was unmistakable in the photograph. One more detail chilled her: a paperback novel lying beside the girl in the van. My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews, one of Tara's favorites, a book she had reread more than once. This could not be coincidence, Patty said. John Doel was more cautious at first. The Polaroid was imperfect. Faces were partly in shadow. The angle obscured details. But after careful study, even John began to lean toward the same conclusion: the girl could be Tara. The photograph was sent to Los Alamos National Laboratory for analysis. Experts used state-of-the-art methods, comparing facial proportions, landmark distances, skull contours. The result: inconclusive. The similarities existed, but the image quality and lighting variables made a definitive identification impossible. The FBI conducted its own analysis. They confirmed the photograph was authentic, a real Polaroid, not manipulated, likely taken in the late 1980s based on the film material. But who the subjects were remained unresolved. Analysts noted the girl resembled Tara, yes, yet so might thousands of young women of similar age and features. As for the supposed scar, the photo simply wasn't clear enough to say whether the dark mark on the leg was a scar, or shadow, dirt, or film artifact. Efforts to identify the boy led to another tragedy. Investigators compared his image against missing children and found a striking resemblance to 9-year-old Michael Henley, who had disappeared in April 1988 while camping with his father in New Mexico. His parents studied the photo and believed it was their son. The dark hair, the facial shape, even clothing that looked like what he wore when he vanished. If that were true, the photograph would be damning proof. 2 disappearances, possibly connected. 2 victims held by the same captors. A single case binding New Mexico to a Florida parking lot. For months, the New Mexico investigation went nowhere. Despite numerous reports about a suspicious pickup, police could not identify the vehicle or the men inside it. Doubts grew about the witness accounts. Perhaps people saw different trucks at different times and, with the town on edge, stitched those memories onto Tara's case. Everything shifted 10 months later when a photograph found in Florida reignited the story, only to deepen the mystery. Investigators began comparing 2 disappearances from the same state, separated by just 5 months. No witnesses to the moment of abduction, no ransom demands, no clear physical evidence left at the scene. Then, in 1992, tragedy brought an answer in one of the cases. A hunter in the New Mexico mountains discovered human remains only a few miles from where 9-year-old Michael Henley vanished. The medical examiner confirmed the identity. Findings indicated he died shortly after disappearing, likely lost in the mountains, succumbing to exposure and dehydration. There were no signs of foul play. That meant Michael had not been abducted, and he could not be the boy in the Port St. Joe Polaroid. The discovery shook confidence in the photograph's identifications. If grieving parents could mistake another child for their own, perhaps Tara's family could be wrong too. Analysts had already called the identification inconclusive. Michael's fate added a new layer of doubt. Still, Patty Doel refused to waver. She insisted the girl in the photograph was her daughter, citing facial structure, the set of the hands, even the expression in the eyes. Michael's death, she argued, only proved the boy in the photo was someone else, another victim. Not that the girl was anyone other than Tara. Was the Polaroid a genuine record of captivity, or a cruel artifact that offered false hope to a desperate family? And if the image was real, who were those two young people staring into the camera with bound hands and taped mouths? What followed were years of new theories, false leads, and bitter disappointments. The case gained national attention, drawing serious experts and opportunists. British analysts weighed in and, using their own methods, argued that the facial proportions and cranial features could match Tara. American examinations remained skeptical or inconclusive. The split only deepened the confusion, and the lack of consensus stalled the official investigation. 1992 complicated everything further when Michael Henley's remains were found and his death placed before the date the Florida Polaroid was likely taken. That ended any linkage to him, and the boy in the photo remained unidentified. No database yielded a clear match. If he had been abducted, perhaps it happened in another state, or even another country, making a positive identification nearly impossible. Two more Polaroids surfaced over the decade, one in Texas in 1996, a young woman with bound hands lying in a car trunk, another in Arizona in 2000, a young woman with a taped mouth in an unknown room. Each image sparked headlines and hope, and each, upon closer review, failed to confirm Tara's identity. Worse, the picture quality was even poorer than the Florida Polaroid, and any identification was speculative at best. By the late 1990s, the trail had gone cold. Valencia County scaled back active searches, focusing only on incoming tips. Most were misidentifications or hoaxes. In 2003, after 15 years in the same house, the one Tara left the morning she vanished, the Calico family made the painful decision to move to Florida. Every day was a reminder of the tragedy. Every phone call could bring long-awaited news or another heartbreak. Patty and John Doyle hoped a change of place might help them start over without letting go of their daughter. In Florida, they stayed engaged, following the case, staying in touch with New Mexico authorities, appearing on programs dedicated to the missing. Patty became one of the most recognizable voices among parents of missing children. Her story inspired others to keep fighting for answers. But with each passing year, hope faded. Then, in 2008, the case was thrust back into the spotlight. Valencia County Sheriff Rene Rivera made a stunning claim to the local press. He said he knew what happened to Tara, and he could even name those responsible. According to Rivera, Tara died in an accident involving several local teenagers. They struck her on the road. Panicked, they chose not to call for help. Instead, they hid her body and the bicycle somewhere it has never been found. Rivera emphasized this was not premeditated murder, but a tragic mistake made worse by terrified kids making the worst possible choices. At the time, he said, they were minors, which explained their panic and the desperate attempt to avoid consequences. The most provocative part of Rivera's statement was this. He claimed to have enough information to identify those involved, but said arrests were impossible without a body and corroborating physical evidence. He hinted his sources were anonymous, too afraid to testify openly. The family's response was divided. John Doyle publicly condemned the announcement. If there could be no arrests, he said, such claims only inflicted more pain and undermined trust in law enforcement. Patty spoke more cautiously, but she also doubted the accident theory. Witnesses had reported a suspicious pickup stalking Tara, a pattern that sounded deliberate, not accidental. Rivera's announcement led nowhere. No arrests, no new evidence presented. Tara's resting place remained unknown. Within months, public attention ebbed again, and the investigation slipped back into limbo. In 2009, another strange incident surfaced in Florida. Port St. Joe police received 2 anonymous letters containing a photograph of a boy, his mouth blotted out with black paint, an eerie echo of the 1989 Polaroid. The letters were postmarked from Albuquerque, but offered nothing useful. That same day, a woman in California called police claiming a vision of Tara's whereabouts. It led nowhere, like hundreds of other tips before it. In the 2000s, loss followed loss. Patty Duell passed away without answers. John Duell kept watch over the case until his death, and he too never saw it solved. The disappearance of Tara Calico became a lifelong curse for her family, a wound that never healed. In 2013, a dedicated task force was formed to re-examine the case. A new team of detectives pulled every file, including materials once considered too sensitive for public discussion. They applied tools that did not exist in the 1980s. DNA testing of retained personal items, computer modeling of her likely routes and timing that morning, digital reconstruction and enhancement of the Port St. Joe Polaroid. Surviving witnesses were interviewed again. Some remembered more. Some changed earlier statements. The team sifted through it all. And yet, even after 25 years, and then 30 and more, no definitive breakthrough came. One of the most intriguing threads in the renewed investigation focused on clusters of young men who in the late 1980s were known for petty violence around Valencia County. Detectives found that during the period of Tara's disappearance, several loose groups were active, using drugs, starting fights, and harassing young women along the roads. At the center of these inquiries was a man named David Lopez, 18 years old in 1988, freshly out of the local high school. According to anonymous sources, Lopez led a small crew, 4 or 5 young men, who cruised in an old pickup from 1953 looking for fun. The description of Lopez's truck matched witness accounts from the day Tara vanished. Light gray or cream paint, chrome accents, and the unmistakable body lines of a 1950s model. Classmates later confirmed that Lopez and his friends regularly drove Highway 47, buzzing cyclists and pedestrians with aggressive maneuvers. But when detectives went looking for Lopez, they ran into a dead end. He had died in a car crash in 1994. The pickup was destroyed in the collision, making any modern forensic testing impossible. Most of the crew were gone as well. Overdoses, accidents, illness throughout the 1990s and 2000s. Only one potential witness remained, Roberto Valencia, the youngest in Lopez's circle back then. By the time the task force reached him, he was serving a federal sentence for drug trafficking. Detectives interviewed him multiple times about September 20th, 1988. Valencia said the group did drive Highway 47 that morning, not to hurt anyone, but to stir up trouble. They saw a girl on a pink bicycle and decided to scare her, he claimed, racing up close, then dropping back over and over. Then, he said, everything spun out of control. The girl fell, a head injury, unconscious. The boys panicked and lifted her into the truck, intending to get help. But on the way, he said, she died. Afraid of prison, they disposed of the body and the bicycle, buried somewhere in the mountains. Detectives were deeply skeptical. Valencia's account conflicted with earlier stories he was rumored to have told in private. Key details clashed with known physical evidence, like where the cassette and the shattered Walkman were found. Worst of all, he refused to give a burial site. Too much time had passed, he claimed. The land had changed. He couldn't remember. Investigators suspected that Valencia was either fabricating the story or holding back something much darker. In 2018, the investigation briefly surged again. A woman named Melinda Boswell, a former classmate, came forward. She said she had hidden information for years and now wanted to tell the truth. According to Boswell, rumors in the 1980s swirled around a group of older boys who raped and assaulted younger girls. They were allegedly protected by a local officer whose father held a high position in county law enforcement. Boswell claimed several girls were attacked, and none reported it because of the group's connections. She believed Tara Calico could have been another target, but this time, she said, something went wrong, and the girl was killed. Her most disturbing claim: she said she personally saw Tara's body in the basement of one of the boys' homes days after the disappearance, after she wandered downstairs during a party. Detectives followed up on every lead. The house had changed hands multiple times. Renovations had altered the basement. Any physical trace that might have existed was gone decades earlier. Some details in her story conflicted with established facts. In the end, nothing could be confirmed. In 2023, the 35th anniversary, Valencia County officials made a striking announcement. They said they had compelling evidence to charge specific individuals in Tara's disappearance. Sheriff Daniels Rodriguez stated that new witness statements and additional evidence allowed investigators to identify, with high confidence, the group of young men who followed Tara that day. He said the case was in its final phase, that arrests could come within months, and that Tara's family had been briefed on the progress. But more than a year passed. There were no arrests. Rodriguez explained the delay as the need for more corroboration and complex forensic work. Critics argued that dramatic promises without action only inflicted more pain on the families. By now, most of those who might have been involved are dead or elderly. Witnesses have passed on, or struggle to remember with precision. Each year that slips away reduces the chances of a resolution. The Port St. Joe Polaroid remains the most haunting artifact in the case. Yet, modern image analysis leans away from Tara being the girl in the photo. Face comparison techniques have improved, and the consensus has shifted toward no reliable match. Tara Calico's case has come to symbolize the limits of missing person investigations in America. Tens of thousands vanish each year. Most cases never find a definitive answer. A young woman went for a bike ride and never came home. A stark reminder of how fragile a life can be. Today, nearly 37 years on, Tara Calico is still officially missing. The case remains open, but active searches have long since faded. Boxes of files, stacks of photographs, hundreds of interviews, and still no answer to the only question that matters.